Cheers, Trish.
Today, my name is Aaron. I'm coming at you live from Singapore.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to
Chips for everybody.
Chips for everybody. Yes, that would be an
We have Oleg and Mark. How's it going? Welcome to the stream and thanks for joining us.
I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, a little less snow than you guys see up.
How's it going, Tommy?
Hey guys, how are you?
speaker. Daniel, how's it going?
Hi, good, thanks.
Is Azure function is just an entry point to
Hey, what's up, everyone? Joining us from the Solace community. Thank you for coming to yet another live streaming event for our virtual developer events. We've been streaming these events for over 2 years right now on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So whatever you're joining us, thanks for coming along and joining for another one of those events. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. Today's event is going to be pretty interesting. We will be talking about the new Solace PubSub Plus Spring Cloud Stream Binder version 2.3, and my colleague Giri will be joining me shortly. In the meantime, while we wait for people to join us, trickle in from LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, let us know in the comments section down below or to the side, depending on where you're watching us from, where you are joining us from. What city, country, state you're joining us from. If you're coming in, just put a hi or hello in the chat to know that you're around here. Today's event is going to be pretty interactive, so I'm hoping to get some questions and interactions from the audience, and Gary will be doing some live coding, samples and demos for the new features of the Spring Cloud Stream Binder version 2.3. So without further ado, I will bring in my colleague Giri to the stage. Giri, how's it going? How are you?
Hey, Tamimi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Where are you joining us from, Giri?
Hey, I'm from Bangalore, India.
Bangalore, India. Yes, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I forgot to mention that, so I'm joining here. It's early morning on my end. What time is it on your end?
Yeah, I can see it's nice and bright for you. For me, it's 8:30 p.m. So
8:30 p.m.
Dark.
Dark towards the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yes, we have people joining us. I know Jennifer saying hi, hello. Jennifer from YouTube. So thanks for joining in. You said you're joining from India, Bangalore, right?
So I am. I'm from Bangalore, a city that gets 4 seasons in a day.
Nice.
I can talk about that later.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Well, let's get right into it and see what we'll be doing today. Gary, what is it that we'll be doing today, and what are the things that we'll be talking about?
See, one of the fascinating thing about Solace PubSub Plus is the multiple interfaces, variety of interfaces with frameworks, languages, and so on, right?
Right.
And for me, the most exciting thing is the Spring Cloud Stream.
Right.
which is a pretty popular enterprise framework adopted by many enterprises, right?
Right.
So there's a new release that came about around March 15th, I believe. So it has a lot of enhancements to the existing features as well as a bunch of new features. So I'm going to be focusing on bringing about more details and make it more palatable for developers. Yeah.
Sounds good. Right. I know that you do have a slide deck. I'll go over. So I'll go ahead and I will put your screen, your share screen to the stream.
Awesome.
And yeah, so go ahead, and the stage is yours.
Thanks, Tamimi.
No worries.
Hi, folks. As Tamimi says, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the live stream. So I'm going to be spending time on talking about Spring Cloud Stream Binder version 2.3 for Solace PubSub Plus. And without any ado, let's get into the details. Now, before we go into the feature set, let's briefly talk about what is Spring Cloud Stream. Pretty much all of you might be some level of exposure, or having some level of exposure, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time. It is a framework to build event-driven microservices, that's for sure, right? And it is built based on Spring Boot integration and Spring messaging. And to enable this real-time event exchange, it also has a framework to integrate with external brokers like Solace PubSub Plus, Kafka, RabbitMQ, and so on. And at the outset, it supports three key patterns, rather, I would say the type of applications. A source, which is to kind of produce events, and then a processor, which receives an event, do some processing, and push out the processed event. That's a second one. And then the third one is a sink, simply kind of receives the event and consume it, right?
Right.
So all the communication happens over what's a term we call as a channel in the Spring context, right? These channels are nothing but, the transport-specific binders, depending on the underlying middleware that you have chosen, basically the broker you have chosen, right? So if you notice this transport binder component, that is the one that is very specific to the underlying broker, right? You cannot use a Kafka binder with a Solace. So that makes it very specific to the underlying broker. And in the big picture, one thing to notice, Spring offers you a framework which kind of you don't have to worry about knowing the native messaging APIs.
Right, and that's the nice thing about Spring Cloud Stream. I really like this about Spring Cloud Stream is the fact that it abstracts the underlying implementation of the messaging API. So at the end of the day, you're just working with Spring without needing to know the ins and outs of the underlying messaging API, whether it's Solace, Rabbit, Kafka. They just follow the conventions that is set by the Spring Cloud Stream.
Totally. Spring being configuration driven, right? So that means it defines all this simple and plain terminology like producer, consumer, and then offers all the out-of-the-box serialization capabilities, deserialization capabilities, conversion, and so on. So it's fantastic to the extent that you don't have to know the native APIs of respective brokers. So you just need to kind of master this framework. You can start building microservice applications in no time.
Right.
So the one thing, if you notice, I mentioned configuration driven, right? That's a specialization of Spring, starting from the good old Spring, Spring Web, Spring Reactor, to all these components. Everything is driven by configuration. The only piece that you'll be coding is your business logic. The same is true here. What you're seeing here is basically the three components that makes up this binder. The binder per se is the one that implements the communication specific to the underlying message broker. That's the one that speaks the native API, right? So obviously it's provided by the broker vendors, all right? And then you have what's called as a binding. That's nothing but the interface, which receives the message from your application code and then passes it down to the broker. And similarly, it is the one that receives the message from your broker and then hands it off to the application code in your Spring application. Right. And if you notice in this whole game, what we refer to as a simple message, that's a Spring message. It is a data structure that is used to communicate or exchange information between these applications, basically the microservices. If it's not for that, these are all standalone Spring applications doing some particular business logic, right? Now, by enabling this communication, we got everything talking to each other. Now, on the right-hand side, if you notice, this is the configuration for a Spring Cloud Stream application. Here, for brevity, I have split that into three parts here. The first one that you see here is the Spring Cloud Stream common properties, which is very generic and will be common for pretty much any binder that you choose to go with. So you see the terminology like bindings, and then the function name. This is nothing but the interfaces, right? And then destination, group, etc., etc. These are all Spring Cloud Stream specific property settings.
Right.
The next one that you see here is the binder and session specific properties. This makes it very, takes it closer to the underlying broker. So you see here, the binders is a name Solace broker, and then the type is Solace. So you could have a Kafka, you could have a RabbitMQ, and so on. And underneath that, pretty much everything is very specific to the
to that specific
broker.
binder that is defined in that binder. Okay.
So start from connectivity information to other configuration and so on, right?
Right. Yeah. So this means that if there's any new binders, like let's say any new versions of the binders, it's this section that gets changed. So like let's say today, like version 2.3 of the binder, you're gonna be it'll be more on this section of the configuration, at least just in the binder section.
Absolutely. In fact, you can expand that, right? You can have a binder talking about the Kafka configuration. You can have another binder talking about Solace configuration. That means you can have two applications from distinct brokers communicating with each other using Spring Framework. Yeah.
Cool.
And then the last piece is about consumer properties. This is just an example, where you talk about specific settings that you want to import on the consumer behavior and functionality and so on. Right? So this is very high level. Let's move on to the binder specifics. As I said, the 2.3.1 just came out in March, right? So you can find more details about this binder in this URL. Pretty much you can do a Google search, you will get there. All I'm highlighting here on the right-hand side is the kind of feature list, right? So majority of them are new, but some of them are enhancements to the existing features.
Nice, okay.
So given the time constraint, I have a demo and then kind of a talk about stuff for all these features. We will see how much ever we can cover here.
And again, sorry to interrupt, Giri. So these new features for the binder, again, you can get more details about it from the GitHub page. But just a reminder to anyone as well on the stream, if you want to use the binder, if you have any further questions about the binder, we do have the Solace community at solace.community, where a lot of people go ask questions about the binder or just ask questions about Solace or any other technology in general. So we'll be showing a high level kind of like overview on these features and get like touching on these separate features. But again, if you have any further questions, you can come to the Solace community and answer and ask any questions there. So Giri, back to you.
Absolutely. On the same time, Tamimi, this is an open source project. That means pretty much the code and the documentation, release notes, everything is on the GitHub.
Nice.
Right? If you want to come to community, you can interact with the experts and exchange ideas and opinions. But if you just want to get into the nuts and bolts of the binder, you can go to GitHub. Check out the code, run it yourself, create an issue, submit a PR, and so on. So to that extent, it's an open source. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right, so let's bridge the gap between the Spring terminology and Solace terminology, at least the concept wise, right? So in Spring, when we refer to something as a destination, right, that's nothing but, either a producer is sending a message to a destination or a consumer is expecting a message, right? So here in Solace, typically there are topics, and obviously you have to subscribe to a topic, right? So the producer bindings always sends a message to the topic. That's the foundation, right? And if you expand on it, when you talk about receiving messages, the Spring terminology is you create a consumer group where you can have one or more consumers. That means concurrency is quite possible. That's all, it's very specific, available as part of the Spring framework. When it comes to Solace, we are talking about durable queues, right? Where we can have multiple sessions connecting to the same queue and retrieving the events.
Right.
So it all kind of there's a lot of parallel between the Spring concept and Solace, the concepts, right? And the last piece is when you don't specify a consumer group name, that's your anonymous group. In our terminology, we call it as a temporary queue. Right? Pretty much, the whole Spring message exchange is going to be built around these notions. So that's why I thought, it'll be useful and a quick reckoner for people to relate to things. Yeah.
Cool.
Before I go further, I just want to do a walkthrough of a simple Spring Cloud Stream application. All right. I'm going to switch the screen. Let me know if there's any trouble.
All right. In the meantime, while you get the screen, again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. I asked a question earlier if you've used Spring Cloud Stream. So I'm curious if anybody have used Spring Cloud Stream before, or I've used the Solace binder in particular. Put it in the chat window, so we could get an idea on who's using the Spring Cloud Stream. And Giri, you mentioned that you will be getting into hands-on code, right?
Yeah,
Please, if you can zoom in so that
Is
we
it
can
better?
get an idea. Yeah, that's good. If you can
Yeah.
zoom in, that's good.
So if you look at this, is the only it's a Spring Boot application basically, right? This is the only 4 lines of code that we have written here.
Right.
It's a function that expects an input, which is payload as a string, and then an output is a string. The function name is uppercase,
Right.
and simply converts the incoming string to an uppercase and returns it. So from a easy reading perspective, there's not much business logic, but obviously it can be more complicated.
Right.
But the power of this bean is driven by the configuration that you have in the YAML file. This is the one that we started talking about, right? So you can see here the cloud function name, that's the starting point. It's uppercase.
Right.
And then you start defining your bindings, nothing but the interfaces via which it's going to communicate to the broker. Uppercase in 0, out 0, these are the conventions. Once you spend time with the Spring Cloud Stream, you would get to know any function name and then suffix with this in, and then a counter if you have more than one function with the same name and so on, right? So you get to specify the destination and the group and binder. You see pretty much everything that we discussed in the second slide, the configuration of whole Spring Cloud Stream application, carrying these Spring properties, common properties, and then the binder properties, as well as binding properties. In this example, we don't have any, but when we move further, you will see. So you can see that the incoming message is going to come from message broker Solace, because we did specify the binder is Solace broker, and the outgoing message is again going to hit the Solace broker, all right? And it's going to be published on topic, uppercase topic, all right? Okay. So let me run this quickly.
Nice. And the nice thing about this is there is no any Solace messaging APIs, at least in the business logic.
Absolutely none.
Yeah, just using the conventions of Spring Cloud Stream, the conventions that is provided by the Spring Cloud Stream framework.
Yeah. So I'm going to run the application and keep it ready. This is basically a Spring Cloud Stream. Literally it's a microservice.
Right.
It started. It's waiting for the trigger. Let me also talk about this. So throughout this demo, what we have done is, instead of building a plain consumer waiting for events to be delivered to it, or a plain producer just keep on producing events, what we've done is we wanted it to be triggered by an action. That's why we chose this function interface with the input and output. What it means is, I'm going to go to our Solace broker interface, right? And I'm going to use the try me. Just a second. Let me get these things correct. And we saw that if he published an event to the destination called QName, right, with a payload, it's going to be converted and to uppercase and published to this topic, right? First, let me subscribe to this topic. Connect. By the way, I'll be relying on this simple tool called Try Me we have in our broker for a quick
testing things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm sure pretty much everybody will know about this. If not, I would highly recommend. It's a very quick one that you can use. Right. I am publishing to this topic by name QName, right? And you can see here, the message got published, and it comes out as a case converted string.
Right. So that's kind of like a simple processor. Yeah.
Right. Now, if I go back to the Spring application, there is, we are not putting any debug information, but technically, what happens can be interpreted from this YAML file. An event was published to this topic, which was given to the Spring application through the binder, and then the binder invoked this interface. This is the binding name, uppercase, right? It produced an output. That output string has been sent as a message to this topic on the Solace broker, right? So if you notice, literally there is no API or specific things about Solace in this entire game. It's all pure Spring Cloud Stream and Spring Boot application code. Okay. Just with this configuration, we were able to enable this message exchange. Make sense to me?
Yeah, makes sense. I realized I was on mute. But yeah, this is great.
All right, I'm going to again switch back to my slides. So just wanted to set the stage, what this Spring Cloud Stream is all about.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Just a second, I'm coming in.
All right.
Okay, we are back to slides.
Yeah, back to slides. You're on.
Thank you. So one of the new features that came in this release is a custom queue name. Internally, Solace is pretty open. You can name your queues and topics anything you want. We don't have restriction. We know that, right? But when it comes to Spring, the framework per se has kind of a, I wouldn't say enforced, recommended a scheme for the queue names and the topic names, right? And the default scheme goes like this: the prefix, familiarity, modifier, group name, destination coding, encoded destination, right? These are all standard properties that you can find in your YAML file, the application configuration file. If you don't find it, it means it has a default value, which is what is being picked up while constructing the queue name. Now, when we go back to the Eclipse, I'll show you, without specifying any of these things, till we got a nice name for the queue, just that it looked funny, SEST/WK/plain and so on. So it's because it's relying on the default values set by the binder, right? Now, in this, what's called as a context variable, these are the one that drives the naming convention. Now, on demand, I believe some of our customers have asked for the ability to name the queues that's convenient and suitable to their business unit scope or application scope. So what we did is, we picked up a feature from the Spring framework to customize the name, right? So the customization is basically an expression of this queue name in a specific language called as a Spring expression language. All right. This is a simple language, but it has its own constructs. It supports complex data types and variables and so on. More information can be found in the Spring documentation. But what you see here is the current scheme of things, how the name is constructed. First, it checks the queue name prefix. If it is available and not null, then it takes the value. If not, empty string, and then concatenate with the familiarity in queue name. That is basically, if is it an anonymous or not an anonymous. If it is anonymous, so you can see where it's going, right? It relies on these internal context variable settings and then comes up with a naming scheme. You can anytime override these things, all right? So Tamimi, I think I'm going to request everybody to bear with me switching between the slides and the Eclipse.
Okay, no worries.
Because everything comes down to a good action, right?
Right.
Seeing is believing, in a way to say it.
So now you want to demo the using the custom queue name.
Yes.
All right, you're on screen.
Absolutely. Thank you.
No worries.
All right. Before that, let me just clean up the queues so that it doesn't interfere or confuse anybody. Okay. Before I do that, you see the naming scheme here?
Yeah.
No, we didn't specify any of the context variables.
That was by default set by the framework. Interesting. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Right. It can be anything, based on the properties that you have in the file, right?
Right.
So what you're going to do in this exercise is you're going to override this.
Okay.
Let me run this and then go and analyze the code. All right. So here's the thing. If you notice, I have all these variables. Obviously we can ignore this provision durable queue. These are all kind of a context variable from a provisioning perspective.
Right.
What we need to care about is this queue name prefix. I want my queue names to be prefixed with queue name dash.
Right.
All right. And then the expression that I want to use to construct the entire queue name, the final queue name is custom dash concatenated with properties queue name prefix. You can see here, right? Some kind of a rudimentary language, but it's good enough to construct an expression that can result in a string literal. Okay. So I specify the queue name expression, and then I will talk about this more in detail. There is also a concept of error queue, which we'll be touching upon later in the feature set. Error queue also, have to have a name, right? You can also customize the error queue name by using the same concept of expressions.
Nice. Right. And this error queue is a framework feature. So like error queue is a convention that is shipped with the Spring Cloud Stream framework, and anyone who uses Spring Cloud Stream framework is aware of the concept of an error queue.
That's correct. That's correct. We just extended it and implemented in our binder. So in a way to say it, this whole exercise is our Solace feature set are getting more and more aligned with the Spring, so that anybody who knows Spring, they don't need to even worry about whether Solace supports or not. They will be using the conventions of the Spring when they get the full advantage of the power of Solace Broker. Yeah. All right. So
Sounds good.
I have started the application.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to examine the queue name, which is what I would expect to see here. I'm going to refresh. You can see here, my queue name is custom, which is the prefix that I enforced, and then queue name, WK, my group name, and then my destination name, right? So let me just make a note of this. I'll go here. I'll explain to you what I mean by that. You can see here, custom is a prefix, and then the queue name prefix is queue name dash, and then WK is basically checking whether it's anonymous or not anonymous. So all these properties, right, they can be specified in your binding setting, right? If you want to override that, you can do that. If you skip it, it's going to take the default value. That's how we ended up in having SCST/WK/plain and so on. So you can override anything. So this is a new feature, even though it's a very small and simple one, it empowers the developers to kind of give resource names aligned with their business unit or business requirement, right? All right, so this is about the queue name feature. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it on the chat. Tamimi,
yeah, I'll keep track. I'll keep track on the chat window to see if there's any questions coming in. So far you showed the custom queue name and the custom queue name and the error queue.
Yeah,
perfect.
We'll talk about error queue. Yeah, sure. Okay. The next feature that we're going to touch upon is something what's called as a manual message acknowledgement. I mean, why do we have to explicitly call out something as a manual acknowledgement? So it simply means that everything is auto-acknowledged. That's the functionality that was there till last release, and that was the out-of-the-box functionality. Again, to align with the Spring framework, and then to kind of satisfy the enterprise requirements using Spring Cloud Stream binders, we just implemented this feature in this release. So a received message is typically automatically acknowledged. We want to break that. So what we do is, when a message is received on the message handler, first thing we do is we explicitly disable the auto-acknowledgement functionality. All right. At that point in time, the message received in the consumer code is with you. At the same time, the queue is going to hang on to that message, right? If you didn't disable the message would have been automatically acknowledged, and the queue would have kind of removed that from the queue. Broker would have removed that from the queue. All right. Now that you have the message in your hand and acknowledgement callback has been disabled, there are three options for you. Basically, you can accept the message. That means that, yep, I got it. I'm happy with that. I am acknowledging. Or you can reject the message. What does it mean to say reject? Meaning, right? I got the message. I want to acknowledge, but from a business context perspective, I don't want to process this image. Maybe there's a logical issue with that, or maybe it's a undesirable message that I want to drop. So the dropping the message is more on the consumer side functionality. I don't want that to be held up in the queue. So that means accept simply retrieves and acknowledges, reject retrieves, acknowledges, but then drops the message. All right. So that's the difference between accept and reject. And then the last type of last option available for you is requeue. Requeue simply means that you are not in a position to process the image right now, but if you get the same message after some time, maybe 10 seconds or 30 seconds, or maybe give it to a different session, there is a chance that this message could be processed. So this dwells into the I wouldn't use the word infrastructure, rather the conditions in which the consumer application is running. Maybe you're running low on the disk, or maybe your downstream database connectivity is broken, right? So obviously database might come back in next 5 minutes or 30 seconds. So you don't want to process that message. So you want to requeue that message. What it simply means is you are not acknowledging the message, and the message will be in the queue. And on the consumer side, you unbind the current session and then rebind it. If you have more than one session, before you rebind, maybe the next session could have become active, so it might retrieve the message. Hope it makes sense. So accept and reject hopefully is somewhat straightforward, but the requeue is the only thing that that helps you to manage when you want to process the message.
Right.
anything you want to add, Tamimi? Is this
No,
available in any other framework?
yeah, you covered it. You explained it well here. The difference between the accept, reject, and requeue, and kind of the ability to do manual acknowledgements and handle the behavior on the Solace broker through these the framework is a pretty neat feature that you can kind of define how the broker is going to behave depending on if a message is accepted, rejected, or you want it to requeue. And here the nice thing about it is now you can customize the behavior of the how the broker handles the message through your code, pretty much.
Yep, absolutely. It's empowering the developer to handle the consumer side complexities with more nuanced approach.
Yeah.
If it crosses your anybody's mind saying that, hey, what happens if I throw an exception? Or maybe when I'm processing the message, I encounter what happens to the acknowledgement, right? Throwing an exception in the message handler will still acknowledge the message in some way, regardless of whether your auto acknowledge callback is turned on or turned off. So that's something to note, right? So you don't have to go through all this complexity. If you encounter an error, basically the message gets dropped from the queue, right? It is acknowledged. Now, at this point, when I show this demo, now I want to tie the feature that in the previous code I showed you about the error queue, right? So error queue is completely a consumer side functionality. You know, when the broker deals with issues relating to non-deliverability, like a TTL expiry or maybe the max delivery count has exceeded, right? Then it puts it in the dead message queue. It's handled at the broker level, right?
Correct.
Similarly, on the consumer side, you got a message, you run into trouble processing the message. Maybe the payload contains some bad data, or maybe the downstream application is down. You want to reprocess later. You cannot ask the broker to hang on to the message just by using requeue forever, right? Sometimes you may want to kind of throw an error and collect that message in a distinct queue for you to go and reprocess later.
Right.
So it goes hand in hand, with the reject requeue functionality. There's a demo that I can demonstrate here. So Tamimi, I know that maybe a work for you. I'm going to switch again.
Okay, no worries. So again, while we do the switching, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat window. And Giri, the stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. All right. Again, once you look at one application configuration, pretty much it kind of comes around for everybody. Here, I want to show you 3 specific attributes. Last time itself, I talked about error queue name. Basically, you want to call it a custom name, error queue plus destination. That's great. Right. And then this provision error queue, provision durable queue. These are all things like, if the specified binding name, which is nothing but the queue or a topic or queue, doesn't exist, go ahead and create. So that's the instruction that we are giving through the Spring configuration to the binder, and in turn, it provisions these necessary queues on the broker. Right? And this is the most important piece. Just because you have an error queue doesn't mean that it's going to start collecting the messages. You got to bind that. So by specifying auto bind error queue to true, any rejection or any exception that you throw may get collected in this error queue. All right. So that's from the configuration perspective. Few pointers that you need to know. Now I'm going to go into the code. Here, if you notice, again, we are relying on this function interface, which is taking an input message as a trigger and then do some processing and produce an output message, right? So if you notice here, the Spring binder, CloudStream binder provides, Solace binder provides a lot of utility classes, and these utility functions and classes provide the core functionality that will be at the binder level. But what you see here is all pretty much Spring. So you get access to this acknowledgement callback, and then first thing you do is disable. That's what we talked about, right? When you want to manually acknowledge, we want to disable the acknowledgement callback. Done. And then this is our business logic. You may write a different logic, but for me, what I've done is if the incoming message has a correlation ID set, and if it is set with the value accept, I'm going to treat that as a request for accepting the message. If it is set with a value of a requeue as a string, then I will take that as a request for requeue, right? If it is something different other than the accept and requeue, I take that as an intent to reject the message, right? In this process, any exception occurs, I'm going to log that exception. All right. So this is the code here. In this one single demo, we will be able to demonstrate the accept, requeue, and reject functionality. So let's get started. I'm going to start with just bear with me. You know, it's easy to clean up things so that it becomes straightforward for people.
Yeah. So that it people can see like exactly how it's being done.
That's true. Okay, the application has started. Now let's go back to the application.
And now on the broker, just to confirm, Gary, like the queues have been created as soon as the application runs. So if you go back to the queues and refresh this, you'll see that we have an event queue and an error queue in there, and the naming of these queues is set by the microservice pretty much, and it's not dynamically set by the framework
configuration.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Notice here, there's a consumer. There are two consumers connected to the events queue. This is our main queue. Where does it come from? That information comes from here. You know, under the binding section, there's a consumer property setting. In that, we have set the concurrency to be 2. That means we want 2 consumers to be able to retrieve events from this queue.
Yeah.
Right. So, as I mentioned, the trigger is any message on this topic. Right. That will trigger the invocation of this function. Basically, this message will kind of get handed over to the Spring Cloud Stream application, and it will be handled by this message handler, right? So let's just test it out. So let's see. So the subscription, the result would be, let's look at it. So this is the output message, right? If all goes well. So first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to subscribe to this message. I'm going to wait. And then to trigger this whole action, I'm just, bear with me. I could have chosen a better name, but silly me. I have a simple A, B, C. And what matters here is correlation ID. That's where we are controlling the...
Right, because your application parses the correlation ID, and depending on the correlation ID, it gives a different behavior.
Right. I'm going to say accept. That means whatever the message is coming in, retrieve it, accept it. That means acknowledge it, right? We are manually acknowledging it, right? Let's go back to the code and make sure that we are on the same page. So I'm going to print the incoming message, whatever received, and then I check the correlation ID value. If it is accept, I am printing accepting the message, and I call accept explicitly on the act callback. So, okay, I'm done. Correlation ID, the message is coming through. My default topic, the event is published. Now, this event is published. What does it mean, right? So that means it went through a normal flow. There is no dropping of message. There is no requeuing of message. There is no error, right? So how do we know that it's acknowledged? Let's go back and check the queue statistics. Okay, there's none. There is no message in the queue.
Okay.
And I go to stats. Messages queued is 1. And so there was 1 message queued and it was consumed.
Right.
And
which is a predicted behavior. Is that a
predicted
message
behavior.
is,
That's a manual acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm going to go here. And this time around, I'm going to say reject.
Okay.
Right? So what does it mean? I will still acknowledge the message for sure. But when I reject, I expect the event to be queued in the error queue.
That's to be placed in the error queue. Yes.
Right. Now the error queue is not a must one. You know, if you don't have an error queue, nothing happens. The message simply gets dropped. Right?
Correct.
So let's do this. I'm going to clear this. So this time around, we shouldn't be seeing any message because it is, okay, message went out, nothing showed up on the output message, right? I'm going to go back to this queues and There we go. We have a message in the error queue, right? This is the message that got rejected. If it's not for this error queue feature, right?
Right, because
you
it was
can never-
explicitly rejected in the microservice. So now
Exactly.
it's placed in the error queue because it was explicitly rejected. All right,
This
great.
one is pretty interesting, and then obviously we can check the stats here. We
Right.
can see here there are two messages that were queued, and it's empty. That means they were consumed and acknowledged, right? And the last one is about requeue, right? So let's see. This, when I say requeue, the functionality is, let's look at the code. I'm going to request requeue and then sleep for 10 seconds, right?
Right.
And then we also have, sorry, Tamimi, you had a question?
No, I was confirming what you were saying.
Yeah. And then we also say that there's a redelivery attempt of at least 2 times, right? We have 2 sessions, and then we say max redelivery is 2. That means every session will get at least 2 times, and after that, it may get rejected, right? So let's see what happens now. In the requeue, we are simply saying that, hey, hang on to that message in the broker. I don't want to process it now. Don't lose it. I am not taking it, right? So let's.
Right.
So when I publish this, we should continue to see this message. You can see here. Requeue. Okay. Requeuing the message. Finally, it gets processed, right? Let me just show you one more time. I just need maybe let me increase the time to 20 seconds or something. It's too short. Okay. I published an event. It is still in the queue, notice, right? But what's happening is each of these session, they are unbinding themselves. You can see here, unbinding the flow receiver and then rebinding. Since we have 2 sessions, right? You can see here F91, and then it should be connecting to, 1 second, 27F91. Yeah, here it is. No, that's not the one. Requeuing the message, waiting for 0 times.
Oh, so you see here there's a different session.
In the previous example, probably it's more clear. This is F60 and F91. Right now, we increase the timeout to 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
So next time, it will go to the different session. So Bharat, what's happening is it unbinds itself from the queue. When it unbinds, the natural or default behavior is anything that is outstanding will remain as unacknowledged. So that's why we are able to see the event still in the queue. You can check again. Okay, now it's consumed. Yep, here it is. It's consumed by which? Yeah, F60. This is a different one. We were looking at F91, right?
Yeah.
The second session, after 30 seconds, it consumed the image.
Yes,
So
makes sense.
the requeue functionality is to kind of leave it in the broker and unbind and rebind yourself after a point in time, maybe 30 seconds or whatever time it is, so that you are ready to consume now. Maybe the infrastructure issue like database downstream application down or anything else could have been recovered, or maybe different session on the same consumer might be able to process this, right? So Tamimi, any comment or any question? This is again, I believe, only in Spring Framework.
So far there's no comments or questions, but again, like I'm glad you're showing how the Spring Framework functionality and the Spring Framework feature is mapped to and how it's handled on the Solace front.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm switching back again to the slides. Right. So we saw the manual message acknowledgement. The next one I'm going to talk about is basically we have already seen this in action. When a consumer message handling runs into trouble, how does it deal with the error, right? So the error handling. So there are 2 possibilities, right? The first one is error queue republishing. When you reject explicitly, and if you have auto bind set for the error queue, right? So the consumer side will automatically enqueue that message in the designated error queue. That's one option that you have. The other one is, if you have a message redelivery set, it'll, when I say redelivery, meaning automatically it redelivers, the broker redelivers the message for sure. Only thing that you have control is how many attempts should it make. If you look at Spring has a similar feature where you control the number of times, number of attempts to be made to deliver the message. It's a number, 3, 5, you can specify that. In Solace also, we have similar one. That's what you saw in the properties files, max message redelivery count, right? So after that, what happens is it gets dropped, right? So this is from the consumer side. On the broker side, we have already talked about it, right? The TTL or other deliverability issues will automatically put that in the dead message queue if one is configured. Okay.
Right.
Now this is another new feature in this one. Publish error handling. Basically, when you publish a message to the broker, I mean, we expect that to be kind of a queued and then you're done, right? But behind the scene, there is also an acknowledgement from the broker saying that, yep, your publish is successful. It has been enqueued. Whatever necessary resource allocation, be it a disk or be it memory, everything is smooth, right? If something runs into trouble due to that part, or maybe something else, maybe you don't have a permission to publish on that particular topic, right? So the publish operation can fail, correct? So in your regular APIs, you may have a better control on this. You have a kind of a distinct exception that tells you precisely why something failed, right? But in the Spring has a very generic approach. It's not just built for one particular broker, right? It has to work across the brokers. And all these nuances are covered or hidden in the binder. So the approach they take is there is something called as a based on correlation data. So when you are publishing a message, create a correlation data instance. This is not a correlation ID. It's more of a
correlation data.
Data.
Like a Spring Cloud Stream concept.
Correct. So you set that on the message and then publish it. And on that correlation data, you can get a future and wait on that for a period of time, maybe 30 seconds or 60 seconds.
Right.
So this is basically an asynchronous confirmation or the confirmation handling. Otherwise, it would be a synchronous. You publish. If there is an error, you handle that exception. It's a synchronous publish activity, right? In a regular API. In Spring, it makes it asynchronous, right? So if the publish fails, then this future will throw an exception. That's where it kind of merges with our regular exception handling. That exception will tell you whether it's a timeout or interrupted or maybe something else. It'll have all the details, all right? So let's quickly. How are we doing on time? You're okay? Sorry.
Yeah, so far we're doing well on time, which is great. We do have one question that's like more on the Spring Boot concepts, like a question about how to set security in Spring Boot. I will mention this. There's like anything that you have to do from a authentication or security perspective, they're all done on your in your configuration file.
That's right.
There's a section in your configuration file where you can specify how you want to authenticate, how you want to secure the connection to your underlying binder, and the Solace binder handles this translation of authentication to the Solace features. So I hope this kind of like gives an idea on where to look on authentication and security front.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, thanks very much. That's it's the configuration. What we have been discussing in these examples is pretty much focused on the scope in hand. It has a lot more security, and all those things can be nicely captured, and it is well documented in the binder documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So
your screen is shared.
Yeah. Thanks. All right. We are looking at the publisher confirmation. So as usual, the publish topic test is the one that triggers this. And then if it is successful, we want to be able to publish fail. That means we are basically, we are trying to simulate a publish confirmation failure, right? So let me show the code. It will become very clear. Once the message is received, right, I'm going to create a new message with a dummy payload and set the correlation data using this set header property, okay? And if the incoming message tells me that I want to simulate a fail, then I will send a message to this topic, publish topic fail. If it's anything other than fail, I am going to treat that as a success request. So I'm going to publish this topic. So our goal here is to simulate publish confirmation failure, right? So the first condition is the trigger topic message should have this value of fail in the payload. And then we publish to this topic called publish topic fail. Now, in this process, after publishing, after sending through the stream bridge, now you take the correlation data that you set on the message and wait on it. 30 seconds. If at the end of it, if it comes out without any exception, your publish is successful. If there was a problem, I'm going to ignore this interrupted. Something, somebody interrupted this or the process got interrupted. That's a non-issue.
Right.
Or even execution exception could be a localized one. Timeout is the key, right? Broker is too busy to respond, or maybe broker is having a different kind of latency issues or whatever, right? That's where you catch this exception that will come out as an execution exception, and you implement your error handling logic. Maybe you want to retry publish, why not? Or maybe you want to put it in a different queue for future processing or auditing purpose. Anything that you want, you can handle in this failure logic. Yeah. So let's switch over to seeing this in action. I'm going to again clean up these queues. So we have a I start this microservice. It's up and running. Let's go back to code. So what we're saying is the trigger is publish topic test. And on that, we expect the payload to be fail or non-fail. Okay.
Right.
I'm going to go here. Let me get this one. So success. This is upon successful confirmation. And then there's a fail. Both of them have subscribed for test purposes. And this is a test topic I'm going to publish to. Let me leave it as hello world.
And
so
then on the success topic.
Yes. So you can see here, there's no issue, right? The success message came out. Let's go back and analyze the code. If V is equal to fail, no, that's not the case. So I'm going to send a message to this publish topic success, sent, and there is no issue. Immediately we got the response back from the broker, right? We didn't even have to wait. So publish is successful. That's what you see here.
Right.
Here, publish is successful. Right?
Okay.
Now, before we go further, I'm going to initiate a fail, right? By saying my payload is failed. But how am I going to induce the fail? I'm going to take away the permission to publish this message. Particularly,
yeah, like how do we kind of like simulate an actual failure from the broker
so
side?
I take this message, and I'm going here.
So what you're trying to do here is you're leveraging the ACL profiles pretty much on this.
Yes.
Okay, this makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to make an exception. Usually any topic is allowed, but this one I'm going to disallow. Sorry, my mistake. I'm in the wrong screen. Publish topic. Okay, it's already there. All right.
Yeah. So what does this do? By the way, Giri, like when you put an ACL profile to don't allow to publish on this.
Oh yeah. So you grant permission based on some sets, right? You can. It's like you are allowed to publish on any topic. That's a default setting, but except for these things. So you basically capture only the exceptions.
So this means probably like any client that is connected to the broker using the
default
username profile, if they attempt to publish on this topic, they will get a failure pretty much.
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, this is like only exception is documented or captured here, but there could be other scenarios. Deny everything except for this topic. That means you can go like this, right? You can change from allow to
this makes sense. Cool.
So let me go here and let me clear this. Fail. I'm not getting any message. You notice that, right? Now in here, producer received an error message. This is the reason why it failed. Broker responded, right? Now this automatically put us in the published failed, implement your error handling logic here. This code, basically the you can kind of delegate it to an error handler, separate
Right.
code, and
Right.
do whatever which is appropriate for this scenario, right? This is where we are.
Mm-hmm.
So a published confirmation can be authentically captured, and it is all plain Spring functionality.
Nice.
This one got implemented, aligned with our Solace capabilities.
Right.
That's what
right,
we see
right,
here.
right.
Again, till this point in time, we have not seen anything specific to Solace. These are all Spring
Neat.
play.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, except for the topic names. The notations are all, binder specific, but that's okay. But
Right.
otherwise,
We
the
call it the
construct.
conventions of the
Absolutely.
Spring Cloud Stream
Absolutely.
framework, pretty much.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Just a second. Let me just switch back to 26.
All right. Your
Right.
screen is being
So
shared.
just to sum it up, the producer error handling, basically producer will fail when it fails to get the acknowledgement, right?
Right.
So how do you handle that? Set this correlation data on your message, and then get a future on that object and wait for a period of time, whatever is appropriate.
Mhm.
If you get back the confirmation without any timeout or execution error, your publish is successful. If it is throwing an exception, then you can handle it differently. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. The next one is it's not a new feature. We have had support for message converters even in the older releases.
Uh-huh.
Basically, what is a message converter, right? So typically, from a payload type perspective, payload could be based on the MIME, maybe a byte stream or JSON, and then you have to map it to appropriate Java types in order to process in your code. All those things are handled nicely by the framework. All right. There's a convention of what type maps to what type. It's available in the documentation.
Mhm.
But in case you have a proprietary encoding of data in the payload,
Right.
you want that to be converted to something more processable, like a Java list or collection, or maybe something else, right? Then it provides you a facility for you to write custom message converters. This is again full and full Spring Cloud Stream capability, right? Now, why are we talking about this? There is a problem, or rather, there's an issue with Spring. It cannot handle null payloads,
Mhm.
right? By definition, because when it gets a null message, the first thing it does is it treats it's expected to be made up of headers and payload.
Right.
It starts accessing things, and completely it will crash your application
Mhm.
without a doubt. So how do we prevent that? If we are a pure Spring application, we can put the gating checks on either the sender side or producer side. That's easy. But in this case, the message could be originating from a different application through broker to the Spring microservice, right? We don't have full control
Right.
over it. The only gating aspect is the binder. So if at all we can do anything, it has to be done at the binder. That's exactly what's done here. So there's using the message converter, we have the ability to check if it is null. If it is
Right.
null, then you kind of return a dummy payload, or maybe something that can help your business logic to understand that this is a null payload.
Right. So like
So,
null payload handling, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Right. So for that, we have piggybacked on this message converter capability of the Spring, and we are
Okay,
fully compliant, and we support nicely. Right.
Okay.
The one thing to notice is when the binder manipulates this, when it receives a null message, it's going to set this header property Solace SCST null payload to true. So
Okay.
that's another way for you to check. Hey, if it is set, I know
To
I'm
check
having
the
a null
header, yeah.
payload, then
Yeah.
I do what I want. So
Nice.
let me just quickly, it's a quick demo. More than demo, it's just walking through the code itself will make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our standard Spring Boot application, right? We are a consumer. We are expecting data on this function, and obviously you can see the configuration, and the group is synced, and this is the message that we are expecting it from. And when I get it, if it is null, obviously it's going to crash, right? Even
Right.
before it hits this.
Right.
What we're doing is we are defining another bean of type message converter, and we instantiate something called as a null sensor reading converter. I mean, basically, your custom proprietary implementation of this converter handling. What we do, I mean, it's a standard class. We just implement these overridden methods. And if you check headers, if it is null payload is set to true,
right.
I chose the logic of simply returning a empty Pojo.
Okay.
Right? The sensor reading is, if you notice, it has expected to have 4 fields, and expected to have values for all of them.
Right.
So instead of doing any of those things, I'm just simply returning a dummy empty Pojo. So this will at least make the Spring happy, not to crash. Right? So what happens is when you println on this, you will get a dummy payload. Just let's test it out. Okay, the application is ready, and the trigger here is publishing to this group. Yeah, this is the subscription.
Okay.
Solace temperature. I mean, if you notice, bindings interface is pretty simple, but then inside the Solace bindings interface, we provide additional information on the consumer. Hey, also subscribe to this event. There's one thing I want to highlight here is, let's go to that queue and show you. All right, this is the queue that we created, right?
Yeah.
For this temp QS.
Yep.
If you go to subscriptions, you'll be surprised. You'll be finding 2 subscriptions. The first one is your what do you call the destination name?
Right.
So your destination is nothing but a queue, right? The queue name itself will become a topic and a subscription.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean.
And the second one is, if you want additional subscription, you can keep on adding this multiple.
Additional subscription.
Right?
Okay.
So that's how it ended up having this one, right? So I'm going to go in here and
Going to publish to that sensor temperature. Yeah.
So I'm going to make it null, empty body, right? So if it goes as empty, if it's not for the message converter, this application should crash. Rather, you can see it's not crashing because we returned a dummy or a Pojo.
Interesting.
So you got this. So, you can empty or null. There's a class of difference, right? Empty is empty JSON, just a simple parenthesis or maybe a simple curly braces. But null is completely null. That's not acceptable to Spring.
Right.
So this way we can kind of work around that. All right. So far we have seen 4 features. Pretty much all of these things are new in the 2.3.1 binder. Any questions we have?
No questions so far.
Oh,
So
yes.
if you can summarize so far, what are the features that we saw to date? We have the custom name is one of the first feature that you showed. What are the other 3 features that you showed?
Okay, let me go back to the slide. So generating custom queue names, and then null payload handling, message converter, and then we saw the manual message acknowledgement,
and the failed producer for
and then
consumer.
failed consumer and producer error handling.
Cool.
All right.
Nice.
So you are at 9:33. Let me see what more.
Yeah, we're good in time. If we have kind of like spend the next 10 minutes wrapping it up and
that's
showing
it. We're
the
almost done with
batch
this.
or
But
the
2 more features that I want to kind of.
I'm really curious to see the batch consumer feature. I'm intrigued about that. That sounds pretty interesting.
See, the moment you say batch consumer, it doesn't mean that a bunch of consumers working together. Rather, the messages are dealt as batch payload.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So consume messages in batches, irrespective of whether they were published one at a time, or maybe they were published using a batch producer. You know what I'm talking about? So because we have both options, I'll demonstrate that. So in essence, a batch of messages in the Spring Cloud Stream context will be treated as a single Spring message with a payload containing the list of individual messages. So getting a Spring message, when you unpack it, you get a payload with a single message. That's real life. That's what we have been handling so far. But if you turn on a certain flag, you are instructing the Spring to batch these messages and deliver. It brings in a lot of effective, efficiency and possibly some productivity. If your network is premium, which is not true anymore, but the point is, you can. It gives you option for variety of patterns and use cases. All right. So this can be enabled by setting this explicit batch mode flag under the consumer in the binding to true. That's the first requirement that we need to fulfill. And then the next question, right? if it is a single message, the payload encoding and payload decoding is all handled by the framework. But when you are clubbing a batch of messages together, maybe you end up in needing some kind of a compressed message format. So you may end up in kind of using different kind of a content type encoding, right? So all those things can be set if it's not handled by the framework, right? So if you're sending a compressed byte stream, then you can set the content type to octet, and then you take responsibility of unpacking that on the other side. Right. So if you don't want to do that, you leave it to the underlying broker to do the job for you, rather the binder to do the job for you. You can set one flag called use native decoding, and then just things will work as supported by the binder.
Okay.
So batch consumption is all about consuming messages that comes in batches, right? With that said, let me also talk about what is batch publisher. Give me a second. I'm going to switch. Right. Okay, let's take a look at this one first. Configuration-wise, you can see here the only on the binding interface. Now we specify these two properties: batch mode equal to true, and use native decoding to true. Okay. And we set the content type to be octet stream, because we very well know that when broker pushes the message, they all come out as a byte stream. Right. If it's a single message, we don't have to do anything; it'll take care of itself. If it's a batch message, we may have to kind of play around. I'll show you the structure, how it looks, and so on.
Sure.
Right? When it comes to the coding, the application logic, there is a Spring construct called as a batch message. This time around, we are not looking at a single message.
Oh, you're looking at a batch
message, batch of messages coming in as a list in the payload. So it is a single message with respect to Spring, but the payload contains list of messages.
Okay. Okay.
So we're not going to take it and then get the header, get the payload, not like that. We straight away go with this batch message and get the payload and get the headers. Now, when it comes to headers, right? So its whole batch Spring message will have a single header, but all the details about this transaction, rather the exchange.
Right.
But when it comes to payload, you get a list. Notice that? When you get payload, you get a list of payloads. Whereas when you get headers, you get message headers, right? Now, inside this, if you trade through this payload, at a message level, you have your own header. Make sense?
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. You got the data header at a message level. Yes.
Right. And also notice that this is very important. When it is batch a message, this flag will be set with all the headers.
That's neat.
Okay?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of header properties that controls the behavior.
Right.
If it's not for the documentation, you would never get to know how to use them. I always recommend people to go through this the documentation.
Right.
It has lots of nuances. These are all standard JCSMP aspects as well, but they have been kind of brought over to Solace Spring compatibility. All right. So when we get the payload, we put it through this conversion from a byte stream. I know it's UTF-8 encoding. I'm going to convert it into string and print it.
Okay.
Right? So this looks neat. I'm going to run this.
Consumer.
All right. Okay, I'm keeping it ready. And let's go and check what's the message type we are expecting. Publish topic batch. That's the incoming message, right? So I'm going to go in here.
Okay, we're just publishing. We're not consuming to.
No, we're not consuming. So I'm going to publish. Just these are dummy messages, right? So I'm going to keep on clicking. These are individual publishers, right? So I'm going to do as fast as I can.
Right, and just send like multiple
9 messages.
Yeah.
Now let's see here. It got one batch of size 1, and then next batch is 3. All right.
Yeah, and you
so basically you need to let's see. 3 plus 1, 4. Come on. Maybe it's shouldn't take so much time.
Yeah, it just like takes it as a batch.
Yeah, it's all consumed.
Oh, probably no. You sent. There are other stats before, so
Yeah, let me. Publish 6.
So it takes the batch.
Okay, maybe
when you have to publish it, like when you like run it with the batch producer.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
so
that would be a better way to show it. Because
technically, you're right.
Yeah, like you send it, like you have to send the messages in batch for it to be received in.
Right. So let me show you the batch publishing code also,
Yeah.
just to be sure. So here it is. No, it's very simple.
Yeah.
Instead of pushing out a simple message, we are pushing out a collection containing messages, right?
Right.
So just 5 messages added to the array list, and then we just return
And
the
just send the batch together.
the
So yeah,
batch.
let's see how this is.
So
and
we are
is this
sending
publisher
about
publishing to
5.
the right topic? What topic is this publisher publishing?
Yeah,
on?
yeah. This is driven by configuration again. You can see it's going out to publish topic batch.
Okay,
right?
perfect. Yeah.
So I'm going to start this publisher. It's going to wait around for the trigger message, which is something that I'm going to do now. The trigger is publish topic test.
Right.
I'm going to publish here. You can see here, hello world is received, and I'm sure it would have published. Let's check here.
Yeah, so it received
one batch with a 1 message, and then next batch with 4 messages.
Right.
You can see payload 1, payload 2, 3, 4, 5. Right.
Okay.
So each of the payload is a distinct message, and it has its own header.
Right.
So they're just kind of a grouped together and given to the binder as a bundle.
That's very neat. Yeah, just like handling batch producing, batch publishing.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it was this kind of the last feature that you were showing.
Yes. Just a second. Let me wrap it up. 1 second. Hold on.
So you have your.
There's a dynamic producer destination. Again, it's very straightforward. In a Spring context, the destination where the message to be delivered to is controlled through the configuration.
Right.
We saw that, right?
Right.
But if you want to override that, you have the ability. These are the binder headers are all Spring properties. In the message building context, you can choose to specify, hey, I want this message to be delivered to a different topic, which could be totally,
even if it's not defined in your application.
That is correct.
Yeah, so it's like overriding the destination of the message to be the destination where the message is published on in your business logic.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
This is a new feature in this one. The benefit of this is like, it doesn't mean that all the messages have to be routed to the same topic. Right? So you can have a batch publish, right? One message, not batch publish, my mistake. You can have bunch of messages, each message getting routed to different.
And this highlights the power of as well the Solace broker with the dynamic topic is the topics are dynamically created. You don't need to pre-create the topics in advance. So if you have your business logic that you include some information about the operation in your topic, let's say that you want to have like latitude and longitude, or you want to have the order ID in your publishing, and you want to publish every message to have a unique topic address, then you could use this functionality to override the topic destination within your business logic and not just depend on whatever is in your properties file. That's
well said, Tamimi. Well said.
Yeah.
This is a powerful feature now on both sides. Spring supports that, and then we already have the native capability. Kind of marries together very nicely.
Cool.
The next thing is, whoever is there, please do join our community.
Nice.
These are the greatest benefits what you can expect. Experts hang around there. We want to see you there. Spring is a pretty interesting topic. There's no question goes unanswered, and then no question is an easy question because everybody's scenario is unique. And in my opinion, the Spring deserves a lot more exchange in terms of thoughts, ideas, and experience. And it's thriving in our community for sure. So there's a lot of benefit. And then, of course, if you're interested, you can allocate time to get yourself certified. So it's an interesting aspect. Please make time for yourself. The last piece is, Spring is pretty much, ubiquitous. Anything enterprise, the first preferred framework for building a microservice application is Spring, right? If that is true, there is a lot more investment going in around building frameworks around Spring,
Right.
That becomes your proprietary application building framework that's used company-wide.
Right.
So there's a lot of concepts that evolves around that, especially when you put Solace as a broker in the midst, right? So interesting concepts, interesting patterns with event mesh and DMR.
For sure, yeah. Like I always like to see kind of the different use cases that comes with people using Spring Cloud Stream, and we have a lot of clients and prospects and customers in with Solace and in the space that uses Spring Cloud Stream and Solace in a very interesting way, and a lot of people in the Spring community as well. There's a lot of use cases for Spring Cloud Stream as a framework itself that empowers developers to abstract the underlying messaging API with their business logic.
Right. So what I'm imploring here is all those knowledge and experience. Don't keep it to yourself. Please share.
Yeah, exactly.
Become a scholar. There's also an incentive, about $200 or $300 for you. But more than anything, share the knowledge. We welcome you to try out or join our Solace Scholars program. And Spring is a great candidate. There's a lot of interesting topics. If you're using Spring and Solace Broker, you can write about. With that, that comes to a wrap from my side, Tamimi. Hope the participants got a glimpse of not just the new features, but I also try to kind of intersperse with the foundational aspects like the Spring configuration, binders. So I did my best. Hope
Well, thanks for doing this, Giri. That was great. You did a great explanation on at least just kind of like starting. You took us to a very exciting journey of explaining what Spring Cloud Stream is all about as a framework and how it empowers and enables developers to write event-driven applications and just messaging applications, and kind of like delved down into details for the new features on the in the Solace binder for the Spring Cloud Stream Solace binder, and where to find more information. And again, to wrap it up and remind people who are watching us right now, you can find more information on the Solace community and the documentation on the Solace products / Spring Cloud Stream binder. Go ahead on the GitHub repo. Go ahead and check it out. Check out the documentation. If you have any questions, feel free to always ask. And again, as Giri has mentioned, the Solace community, there are a lot of fostering activities, fostering events to do there. So keep an eye on all the different events and activities that we'll be doing. And we have a lot of very cool samples that will enable developers to get up to speed to using Solace and other frameworks. So that's about it. Giri, thank you very much for this. We will be wrapping it up. And that's about it. Thanks for this,
folks,
Giri.
and wonderful to meet you all virtually.
All right.
Soon. Yeah, thank you.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.